There once lived a man named Victor, a well-off businessman in a bustling city. Known for his sharp looks and ambitious nature, Victor was admired by many. When he met Rose, a young woman whose beauty turned heads wherever she went, he was smitten. Rose was not only strikingly beautiful with her slim figure and radiant smile, but she was also kind-hearted, humble, and devoted. Their whirlwind romance led to a grand wedding, and Victor proudly presented Rose as the love of his life. The early years of their marriage were blissful. Victor often boasted about his wife's beauty to his friends, showing off pictures of her and constantly reminding her how lucky he was to have married someone so stunning. Rose, in turn, was devoted to Victor, doing her best to maintain the home and support his ambitions. Soon, Rose became pregnant with their first child. The pregnancy brought joy to their lives, but it also brought changes to Rose's body. She gained weight during the pregnancy, and even after giving birth to their son, she struggled to lose it. Victor noticed, but at first, he said nothing. He assumed she would work on returning to her former figure once things settled down. But as time passed and Rose became pregnant again with their second child, her body changed further. Raising two young children was exhausting, and Rose had little time or energy to focus on her appearance. Her once trim figure became fuller, and the clothes she once wore no longer fit. Despite her best efforts to juggle motherhood and household responsibilities, Victor began to show signs of discontent. At first, his remarks were subtle. He would glance at her and say things like, "Do you really need that extra serving?" Or, "Remember when you used to wear those cute little dresses? You looked so much better then." Rose, hurt but eager to please her husband, tried to ignore his words. She even began skipping meals and attempting to exercise when the children were asleep, but her efforts didn't yield immediate results. Victor's disappointment grew into open disdain. One evening, while they were getting ready for a family gathering, Victor looked at Rose in the mirror and sneered. "You used to turn heads. Now, people will probably pity me for being stuck with someone like you." Rose's face fell, but she stayed silent, her heart breaking. Victor's cruelty escalated as time went on. He started avoiding spending time with her, often finding excuses to stay late at work or go out with friends. When they did spend time together, he made biting comments about her weight, sometimes even in front of others. He would laugh it off as a joke, but Rose could feel the humiliation burn deep within her. The children, though young, began to sense the tension in the household. They often saw their father dismiss their mother or speak to her in a tone that made her retreat into silence. Rose, trying to shield them from the conflict, would smile and pretend everything was fine, even as she cried herself to sleep most nights. One day, Victor invited some colleagues over for dinner. Rose, as always, prepared a lavish meal, hoping to impress them. But as she served the food, Victor made a cutting remark. "Careful not to eat too much tonight, Rose. We wouldn't want you getting any bigger." The room fell silent, the guest awkwardly looking away as Rose's face turned red with embarrassment. She quietly excused herself, leaving Victor to entertain his guest. Over time, Victor's behavior began to affect Rose's health. The constant stress and humiliation drained her spirit, leaving her a shadow of the vibrant woman she once was. Despite everything, she remained committed to her family, believing that enduring Victor's treatment was the price she had to pay for the life they had built together. Victor, meanwhile, grew colder. He no longer saw Rose as the woman he had fallen in love with. To him, she was a reminder of what he believed he had lost, a slim, beautiful wife who fit the image he wanted to project. His frustration turned into resentment, and he began spending more time away from home, often seeking the company of others who admired him. Rose's days became a cycle of caring for the children, managing the household, and enduring Victor's cutting remarks. She held on to the hope that he might one day see her worth beyond her appearance, but with each passing day, that hope grew fainter. Victor, blind to the damage he was causing, continued to treat her with disdain, oblivious to the emotional toll it was taking on the woman who had once been his greatest source of joy. The love that had once defined their relationship seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a chasm of bitterness and unmet expectations. And so, their lives went on, each day heavier than the last, with no resolution in sight. Victor's cruelty became a regular part of Rose's life, though she bore it silently for the sake of her children. She spent her days attending to their needs, ensuring they were loved and cared for, even as her own happiness slipped further out of reach. The children, now old enough to understand the tension between their parents, began asking questions that Rose struggled to answer. "Why is Papa always mad at you?" her oldest son asked one evening as she tucked him into bed. Rose's heart ached at the question, but she smiled softly and said, "Sometimes grown-ups have a hard time showing their feelings. Don't worry about it, sweetheart." But the cracks in their family life were becoming harder to hide. Victor's time away from home increased. He started finding excuses to stay late at work, attend business trips, or spend weekends at social gatherings where Rose was conspicuously absent. When he did come home, he avoided conversation, his disdain for her now openly displayed. One evening, Rose overheard Victor on a phone call. His voice was low, but his words carried clearly through the quiet house. "She's let herself go completely," he said to whoever was on the other end. "I don't even recognize her anymore. I don't know how much longer I can deal with this." Rose stood frozen in the hallway, her breath catching in her throat. She wanted to burst into the room and demand answers, to ask why he had turned so cruel, but her exhaustion and fear of confrontation held her back. Instead, she retreated to their bedroom, tears streaming down her face. Victor's contempt extended to more than just words. He stopped sharing his income with her, leaving Rose to stretch every penny to keep the household running. When she asked him for money to buy clothes for the children, he scoffed. "Maybe if you stopped eating so much, we'd have enough for the kids and you wouldn't need new clothes." The humiliation was relentless, but Rose pressed on, determined to shield her children from the worst of it. She began sewing their clothes herself, using scraps and old garments to create something new. She found small ways to save money and ensure her children never went without, even as her own needs were neglected. Despite her struggles, Rose's inner strength began to shine in quiet ways. She found solace in small acts of defiance, smiling at her children when Victor wasn't looking, teaching them kindness and empathy even when their father failed to demonstrate it. She started writing in a journal late at night, pouring out her pain and frustration onto the pages. It was the only place she could be honest about her feelings, and it became her sanctuary. Victor, meanwhile, grew more distant. His dissatisfaction with Rose turned into an obsession with finding validation elsewhere. Rumors began to circulate in the community about his affairs, whispers that he was seen with younger, slimmer women at parties and business dinners. Rose heard the rumors but chose not to confront him. She feared that doing so would only worsen the situation, and deep down, she still hoped he might change. As the years passed, the weight of Victor's cruelty began to show in Rose's face. The once bright light in her eyes dimmed, replaced by a quiet sadness she could never quite shake. Yet, she continued to endure, her love for her children driving her forward even as her marriage crumbled around her. Victor, too, was changing, though not for the better. His constant pursuit of perfection and external validation left him hollow. He began to realize, in fleeting moments, that the admiration of others could not fill the void in his heart. But his pride prevented him from admitting his mistakes or seeking reconciliation. The house they once shared as a happy couple grew colder with each passing day, the laughter of their children the only sound that broke the silence. Victor's disdain for Rose remained, and Rose's quiet endurance persisted, each of them trapped in a cycle of pain and resentment with no end in sight. And so, their lives continued, neither willing or perhaps able, to take the steps needed to heal the wounds that had been inflicted, leaving their story suspended in a place of unresolved tension and unspoken sorrow. The years dragged on, each one leaving deeper scars on the relationship between Victor and Rose. The children, now teenagers, had grown increasingly aware of their father's disdain for their mother. They resented him for his treatment of her and often stepped in to defend Rose when Victor's remarks turned cutting. Despite their efforts, the household remained tense, with an air of unresolved bitterness hanging over it. One evening, after a particularly heated argument in which Victor had berated Rose in front of the children, their eldest son, Ethan, finally spoke up. "Why do you treat her like this?" he demanded, his voice trembling with anger. "She's done everything for us, for you. And all you do is hurt her." Victor was taken aback by his son's words. For the first time, he saw the anger and disappointment in his children's eyes. It struck him like a blow, but his pride wouldn't let him respond. He stormed out of the house, leaving the family in silence. That night, Rose sat with her children in the living room, comforting them as they vented their frustrations. "We'll be fine, no matter what happens," she assured them, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "We have each other, and that's enough." Victor, meanwhile, wandered aimlessly through the city. For the first time, he began to reflect on his actions. He thought about the woman Rose had been when they first met, the vibrant, beautiful, and kind-hearted person he had fallen in love with. And he thought about the woman she had become, the one he had torn down with his cruelty. He realized, painfully, that her transformation wasn't just physical. He had crushed her spirit, and the blame lay squarely on his shoulders. The next morning, Victor returned home. He found Rose in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for the children. She looked up at him, her face calm but tired, and said, "Do you want to talk?" Victor hesitated, then nodded. They sat at the table, the weight of years of pain and silence between them. For the first time in years, Victor spoke with sincerity. "I've been horrible to you," he admitted, his voice low. "I don't even know where to begin to apologize." Rose looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You broke my heart, Victor," she said simply. "You made me feel like I wasn't enough, like I was nothing. I stayed because of the children, but I won't keep living like this. I can't." Victor felt a pang of regret unlike anything he had ever known. He had taken her love for granted, belittled her sacrifices, and destroyed the foundation of their marriage. "I want to fix this," he said, his voice cracking. "I know it won't be easy, but I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." Rose shook her head gently. "This isn't something you can fix overnight," she replied. "You need to understand that forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. I don't know if I can trust you again, but I do know that I deserve better than what you've given me." Victor nodded, tears welling in his eyes. For the first time, he truly understood the depth of the damage he had caused. Over the next few months, Victor worked to change. He attended counseling, both individually and with Rose, and began taking steps to rebuild their relationship. He apologized to his children and made an effort to be a better father. It wasn't easy, and the wounds he had inflicted didn't heal overnight. Rose, too, found strength in her independence. She started pursuing hobbies she had long neglected, made new friends, and focused on building a life that wasn't defined by Victor's approval. Though her love for him had been deeply wounded, she found solace in the love and support of her children and the community she had quietly built around herself. In time, Victor and Rose found a way to coexist peacefully. While their marriage would never return to what it once was, they forged a new relationship based on mutual respect. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step toward healing, a closure to the years of pain and resentment that had defined their lives for so long.